Hi everyone! In the previous videos I talked a lot about fetch, so now I'm gonna dive deeper and show you how you can work with it. So I'm gonna start with this JSON placeholder type code. It's like a placeholder API where you can query it and see if your code is working. And in this project here I have an index.html that simply loads the app.javascript. So let's get started with fetch. And this is the method fetch, and then you give it the URL. So let's save here and see what we get. You can see that the fetch already completed. That's a nice thing I like about fetch. Instead of using jQuery Ajax, for example, or those Ajax libraries, first of all, it's native to the browser. And second of all, there's no boilerplate involved. So you just simply fetch and it's almost done. So let's see it here. This is the request, network request. And this is the response here, and those are the headers. Now, how can we read this in JavaScript? So as you can see, if I actually copy this and paste, you would expect to get the data here, but this is actually a promise. So you need to resolve the promise. So let's do .then, and let's get back the response. And if I console log the response and refresh, you would expect to see the data here, but you won't be able to find it. So you've got headers, OK, redirected status. You've got the body, but it's a readable stream. And the reason why it works like this is because you would expect fetch to work only with JSON, but that's not the case. Fetch is more of a generic method that allows you to read a lot of other things other than JSON. But the most typical example for developers, for web developers, is JSON. So let's see how we can consume JSON. So since we want JSON, we need to convert this response into JSON. So that's why we're going to return response.json, which in fact returns also a promise. So we need to resolve it again. And this is when we finally get our data. So let's refresh. And this is our data here, the list of users. And just like with any promise, it can throw an exception, so it can throw an error. So you can also catch this. So let's do error. And I'm simply going to say here console.log, there was an error. And error. So I told you that I like fetch because there's no boilerplate involved, but you can see clearly that we need at least 10 lines of code to just consume a typical GET request. So let me show you why we're going to use ES 2015 arrow functions to make this much simpler. So first of all, instead of a regular function, I'm going to use an arrow function, which also allows me to remove these brackets because I only have one parameter here. And then because I only have one line and a return, I can also use implicit returns. So all of that will be just on one line. And then for data, I can also remove the parentheses, arrow functions, and same thing here. So you can see we don't have this boilerplate anymore, and now we can get started with fetch in just about a couple of lines of code. So let's see if it's still working. Yeah, our data is here. Now I'm going to show you a little bit more advanced scenario. What if you want to do a post request? So you just specify the second argument. By default, you're sending a method of get, but now we need to send a post. And if you refresh, that's it here. You're doing a post request. And for example, if you want to set some headers, so I can do headers authorization. Maybe if you're doing JSON Web Token authentication, so bearer 123. If you want to send like a body, you just have to JSON stringify it, and then you can say data 456. So let's run this. I have a typo. That's the post request. Let's inspect it here. So in the request headers, we've got the authorization bearer 123, and this is the payload that you're sending. So it's not really advanced, but that's how you can do, this is like the most advanced use case in fetch, which makes it very easy to use. So now I'm gonna get rid of these arguments, and let me show you two caveats that arise if you're comparing fetch to, for example, jQuery Ajax. I'm gonna show you first. Let's see if we have a cookie here. Yeah, I have some cookies from maybe a previous website I was developing on localhost. So let's see if those cookies are being sent with fetch. So this is not the cookie that you're looking for because this is the one coming back from the server. This is the response header. So I'm going to close it. And you can see in the request header, we don't have any cookie sent. So that's because fetch by default will not send any cookie. And I think this is a great thing because when you're reading a list of users, a list of countries, you don't really need to send all of these cookies every single time. It slows down your request, and most of the times they're not used. There's only if you have, but only if you have like a legacy app where you're doing authentication based on a cookie, then you would need those. And this is where you can specify the include same origin. And this basically instructs fetch to send the cookie whenever you're sending a fetch request to the same origin. But because I'm on localhost now and I'm querying a different API, I'm going to use include just so I can show it to you. So let's refresh. And now this fetch request here, you can see in the request header, we're sending a cookie request. So this will only be useful if you still rely on cookie for a legacy app, for authentication, for example. That's the first caveat. And the second caveat, what if I query a URL that doesn't exist? Or what if the API returns 400 or 500? We should expect this in the terminal. So let's refresh. And even though this is returning a 404, we're not really getting any error. We're not getting there was an error. And if I click on here, app.js, it's still firing the success. And the reason behind it is that this will only trigger if there was a network error or if something prevented the fetch request from from performing. So, which means this will always return from this fetch request, no matter if the response was 400, 200, even 500. So you've got two choices here. You can either check if there was an error here in this method, or you could also make it behave the way you would expect it. And let me show you how you can do that. So I'm going to copy paste this method check status, which basically checks the response if it's okay, and then it's going to return the response. But then if the response was not okay, then this is going to create an error and this is going to reject the promise. So let's see how we can use it. So just here I can do .then and then check status. I don't need to call it because this is going to be called and then the response is going to be inside of it as well. So now if I refresh this page, you can see there was an error. So it's actually doing the exact thing we expected to. So if I refresh with users, it's now working again. So it's really up to you. You could either handle errors here, or you could always add this like helper method to check status, and that will basically throw an error here, or you could actually get all the success here. So that's it about Fetch. Don't forget that Fetch is supported on all browsers except a couple of them. So in case you want to see how you can use it today, make sure to check out my Promifil video. Thank you, and make sure to subscribe as I'll be releasing a lot of more videos soon.